Good evening. Check, check, check. Checking the audio. Good evening. All right, sounds great. Hi, everybody. Good evening. It's 7 p.m. in the Mountain West, 9 p.m. with all of my friends in Florida who insist on rubbing it in about how warm it is there. We're currently a balmy 22 degrees. And so I hope everybody had a great week. I did. All things considered, I'm having a bit of a hot flash right now. So, yeah, I got a weird shadow for some reason tonight. Let's see. I'm missing a light. Let's see, what did I forget to turn on? Maybe this one? Let's see, I think it's this one. Sorry, folks, I did forget to plug in and turn on one of my lights. I'll get to that as soon as I can. I gotta reach clear over here. Get back there. There we go. That's better. That's more better. All right. Sorry about that. Run back over here to the chat real quick and see who all's in. Gary from Arizona. George and John, both down in Florida. Tim Myers is in. 4 to 7 inches of snow for Ohio tomorrow. We haven't had any real snow, but it's been awful cold. Gary and I were chatting about grocery stores earlier. Oh, Vincent, RV Life, they're in Florida too. I forgot about that. So, hello, Bruce. I'm so glad to see you here tonight. Kind of catching up here a little bit. See who else is in the chat. Scotty's in. Judy Kimbrough's checking in. Hello, Judy. So John was mentioning that he's in Florida and just got down there, and it's costing him $1,000 a month to park on the grass. I'm hoping that includes utilities, setup, hookups. Scotty's been looking for some security on his RV and fifth wheel, and I'm interested to hear more about that, Scotty, once you get it set up and running. So keep that in mind. Oh, John and George says it's only $7.95 where he's at. Old park, but most of the sites are well shaded. Yeah, no local traffic. Cool. Tom checking in from Whidbey, 43, and foggy. Yeah, it's been awfully foggy here too in the mornings. Eric Myers is in. Hi, Eric. Eric says he's surrounded by Canadians. Yeah, they like to go south for winter, especially down around Arizona. I wasn't surrounded by Canadians, but when I was in Tucson wintering, I had 3 Canadians within two rigs of me. John says, water and sewer cable, but you pay for electric. Okay, that's kind of typical. At the park I used to winter at, Desert Trails in Tucson, which is, it's out there west of I-19. Or is it 17 down there? No, it's 17 from Flag to Phoenix. And then it turns into 19 from Tucson to Mexico, Nogales. We were still talking about what they're paying for their rates. But I was chatting with one of my old neighbors on Saturday from down in Tucson, and yeah, the rate in our park, in the old park I used to stay at, went up $250 a month. I guess there's a lot of people pretty irritated about that, but I guess what are you going to do? It's getting harder and harder to find spots in RV parks, especially for the whole winter. So there's some advice for you if you're considering going full time and you want to winter somewhere. Get a spot early on so you've got a spot. John says Canadians are good people. I totally would agree with that. Okay, so Tim Myers asked me before the Christmas break to talk about a particular subject. And hang on here. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to bump my camera too much. And so I've been looking into it, and that is carrying a weapon, firearm, gun, whatever you want to call them. I prefer to call them firearms or weapons, in your RV while you're traveling. And I've looked into it. I've looked into it a lot, did quite a bit of research. And there is just no way that you could recommend or tell somebody the specifics, because carry conceal is all over the place. Some states have reciprocity, some states don't. Idaho has 2 different levels of carry conceal. They have one called enhanced and one called regular. And the enhanced is good in some spots, whereas the regular isn't. And I mean, it's just a mishmash of confusing rules and regulations. So I'm going to be a little bit careful and say you need to do your own research if you plan to carry a firearm across and into states in your RV, period. Now, there's the Firearm Owners Protection Act, FOPA, that says you have the right to carry your firearm across any state line, provided it is in a locked case, it is not within reach of the driver, and the ammunition is stored in a separate location. Now, here's the reality of that. Why bother carrying a firearm for personal protection that is locked in a case with the ammunition put somewhere else, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth, if you're carrying it for protection? By the time you got it loaded and ready to go, you'd be in the soup if you actually needed it for protection. So that's kind of where I'm going to have to leave it, because like I said, the state rules are all over the place. There are a couple websites out there that have some pretty, well, would seem like decent information around that, and one of them I believe was called carryconceal.org. Let me just check that. Yeah, and I don't recall what it was. Just Google carry conceal across state lines. And yeah, true, Tom, yes, each state has its own rules. But from a federal perspective, the only way you can legally carry a firearm across state lines is in a locked case with the ammunition stored elsewhere. It's the same way you have to travel with them if you're flying. All right? If you're flying, it has to be in a locked case. The ammunition has to be somewhere else. Obviously, it's not within reach of the driver. Now, that's what FOPA provides you if you're carrying your firearms. Okay? Other than that, I'm going to have to leave it on your own, because every state is different. Every state doesn't accept reciprocity on carry conceal from other states. And so I think we'll just leave it at that. Unfortunately, I couldn't make a lot of sense out of it. Now, off the record, yes, I carried a firearm with me when I traveled. In fact, I carried several. I had a shotgun, a .22, and a handgun. And I didn't carry the handgun legally. And I'll just say that. And I'll leave it at that. Okay, so back to the comments. Eric says $330 a month plus electric. That's pretty good, Eric. Oh, by the way, though, At my space in Arizona, where I stayed, in Tucson, the electric was included. They didn't have separate meters for all the sites. I suspect they're changing that because it did go under new ownership. Eric Meyer says universal reciprocity bill is in Congress. Yeah, thanks, Eric. Yeah, I'm I don't know. I'm so pessimistic about what's going on in Congress right now. Here's what I feel. I didn't send people to Congress to go around chasing other people because they think they did shit. I sent people to Congress to legislate laws and that kind of stuff, not get into all of this horse hockey stuff that goes on back in Washington. I'm disgusted with the whole game, and I think we ought to throw them all out and start from scratch. All right, I'm going to get off my soapbox here. You guys are going to get me wound up tonight. I'm going to try not to get wound up. But yeah, I'm so sick of what's going on in Congress. We sent them there to make laws. Oh, and the other thing, okay, so while I'm on my soapbox, I worked with confidential, classified data when I was at the facility out here in the desert in Idaho. Anytime we had confidential, classified information out, we were under armed guard. We were in a locked room. When we were working on computers with confidential information, they were locked in rooms with extremely highly refined filtering to keep any electronic noise from going out of them, and so on and so forth. And what I want to know is, how are these people getting out with confidential documents? I mean, come on. This is ridiculous. And it seems like they've all done it. So, I don't know. I got to get off of it. That's a good point. Somebody just mentioned it. Wow, get out, take a sip. Yeah, I need to. I could get sucked into that. I'm just so sick of all of that. So let's talk about RVing and move on, right? Okay, good. Tom Downey, yep. I would agree with you, Tom. Keep it out of sight and don't talk about it. Roundtown Scouter checking in from Carlsbad, so good to see you. Yeah, totally okay. I did take a sip. I was hoping in a motorhome, it's your home you could carry for your safety, but perhaps not take it out of the motorhome. Yeah, I don't know about that. I'm not a smart... Eric says, I'm not a smart man, but I know what's in my garage. Yeah. I bet you are, Eric. Okay, so we were going to talk about RVing, so if you have any RV-related questions, feel free to throw them into the chat window. I'm happy to answer them. By the way, if you have an RV-related topic you'd like to see me cover, I'd like to encourage you to email me your topic to trbolin, B-O-W-L-I-N, @gmail.com. And, yeah. That would be helpful. I'll get to today's topic in a minute once we get through the comments here. In fact, I was going to ask, and I'm glad to see this. Grits and Glamour, hi, it's so nice to have you here. I haven't seen your name before, but we're so happy to see you join us. They're Escapees members. They pay $240 plus electric. He runs electric heat, and with below freezing temps at night in New Mexico, we just paid $316 for rent this month. That's not bad. So you're paying what, $76 for power? That's pretty good if you're using electric heat. So that's not bad. Glad to hear that. I'm assuming that's southern New Mexico, down around where our friend Roundtown Scouter is, Carlsbad. Yeah, Tom Downey says he had a secret clearance when he was in service. Yeah, totally. And did you ever get anywhere with any classified information where you didn't have somebody watching your back? I don't know. Listen up. Eric Meyer says, a motorhome when rolling is a vehicle. And when parked at your house. Yeah, it's kind of gray area, and I agree with you there. Like I say, I can't I'm no legal eagle. I'm no attorney. I'm no lawyer. I wouldn't know how to advise anybody on what to do. I think Tom's advice is probably the best, and probably the smartest is just out of sight. Keep it out of sight. Scotty asks, he's like to add a lighting LED strip to the awning outside. What's the best way to get the wires from inside to outside with no leaky? All right. Um, the best way is to get a small gland, what they call a gland. And what a gland is basically a little widget that sits. They're usually used on the roof, but they can go on the side with no problem. They're available in various sizes, and they give you the ability to put housing onto the surface that you're mounting or penetrating with appropriate amount of lap sealant or butyl tape under the perimeter of it, under the edge of it, and then the wires that come out go through a gland that you tighten down, and that keeps the water from telegraphing down the wire back inside. So yeah, that would be the best way, the safest way, and the most reliable way to get a wire from inside to outside and not have a leak, is to use a gland. I think, if you'll give me just 1 second here, I was going to go look and see. All right. Pop over here. This is a gland. Let me slide myself over here real quick. And so you see here, it's got a nice base that you can seal. These two guys here, this happens to be a solar one. They do have single wire ones that are available, but you know, these are you know, they have a little sealing device in here. There's a gasket in here. When you tighten this nut down, it squeezes this down, which crimps it against the wire itself and stops any water from telegraphing down and into the gland. And so, yeah, find yourself a gland like that. They're called entry glands, that sort of stuff, and you should be in good shape. Oh, thanks, George. Yeah, these are new glasses. In fact, Carl, who doesn't usually make the live stream live, he usually ends up watching it, had asked me some questions about this. And this is, I'm not sponsored by Zenni, okay, so I just wanted to mention that. I got the glasses from Zenni, and I got the 3 pairs. I think I showed you them last week. Scotty says gland is what I know as a stuffing tube in the Navy. Okay, is that what they call them? Cool. Scotty says he'll Google it. Great. Tom Downey, in every state the cops must have a search warrant before they can search your motorhome, so don't give them a reason. Yeah, that's a good point. And in fact, to be honest with you, they have to have a search warrant to search your vehicle. They can't just stop you and ask you to search your vehicle. But they can come up with any reasonable cause, and I think they could probably do the same thing with your motorhome. But yeah, yeah. So okay, we're going to move on from the carrying and or the discussion around that, because it's just too big a can of worms. But yeah, what Uncle Sam don't know, don't hurt him, right? Okay. Alrighty, so I did have another comment come in. Oh, okay, cool. There's a website here I'll share real quick, Handgun Laws US, that Who just shared that. I had it here and then I lost it. Sorry about that. Oh, it's not coming to me here. Sorry. I saw a comment throw through and now I've lost it. The thing about lives in YouTube is I wish they would improve the chat comment management window for sure. Okay, let me run back over here real quick because I did have a question / comment come in that I thought was worth discussing briefly tonight. Hold on here. I was running late tonight. For some reason, I just haven't been able to get my, well, on last week's, on Sunday's premiere, boy, I made the biggest mistake, and I uploaded a video that I'd uploaded for the week before. So that was like really silly, really stupid, comment that I ended up doing. Okay, sorry, I'm just scrolling here and I don't seem to be able to find that. It's always the same, isn't it? So throw your questions in over there into the chat window, and so we'll see if we can get to it. And let's see. Let's see. I think it might have been Bruce, Vincent RV Life, asked about how much vinegar you had to use to sanitize your freshwater holding tank. And I did some research on it, and it's quite a lot. The best I could find, and I thought this was just ridiculous, is they said 50-50 mixture. All right? Well, that's just crazy, right? Because if you have a 40-gallon holding tank, you got to add 20 gallons of vinegar. That's $20. So I'm still researching that. I believe it was Bruce, Vincent, RV Life. But I'm still looking into that to see if I can find something that makes more sense. But the one thing I could find, which was from a public health organization, was a 50-50 mixture. So I don't know that vinegar would be the most efficient to sanitize your freshwater holding tank. I know with bleach, it's... Oh, sorry. I know with bleach, it's a quarter cup for every 16 gallons. I know that's a weird ratio, but it just happens to be the one that I remember. Yeah, good question, Eric. What was it, Tom? He figured Tom has had a battery depletion issue. His chassis batteries have been going dead, and he says he figured out what it was. So what was it, Tom? Share it with us. So I was just going back and trying to scan over the comments here, and Scotty says he's literally laughing out loud, and his wife and granddaughter are looking at him funny. Like that's the first time, Scotty? Question mark. Just having a little fun. Yeah, and if you're shy and you don't want to put your question or comment over in the chat window, you're more than welcome to mail it to me. I think I mentioned that, but yeah, you can mail me your questions at trbullen@gmail.com. We could work it out online or offline, and then I will circle back on that. And yeah, George, aka Dad, is the one who shared the link. Trying to get caught up here. There's nothing, John Besmick asks, what's wrong with Clorox bleach for our freshwater tanks? Not one thing. It works perfectly with no issues whatsoever. I think that Vincent RV Life was probably just looking for an alternative. to using bleach. But yeah, the bleach works just fine. In fact, unless I can confirm that it's not a 50-50 mix, I don't think that vinegar would be practical to sanitize your freshwater holding tank. It might be fine to sanitize countertops and stuff like that if you're looking for something that's a replacement. But I just don't know that, if it's a 50-50 mixture, that's a lot of vinegar. I'm going to keep looking into that, though. I haven't forgotten about it. It's still here on my permanent memory. Let's see if I've missed anything else. Okay. Oh, it was Eric with the water tank. Sorry, I thought it was John, but I can. Thanks, Eric, for reminding me. The water heater is 50-50 vinegar. Yeah, and that's all I could find with respect to the freshwater tank, but that seems like an awful lot of vinegar. So I'm still digging in that. See if I can find something, that makes a little more sense. George, a.k.a. Dad, says his chassis batteries were dropping also. I found out it coincided with each birthday. That's hilarious. Tom Downey says he installed a voltmeter to monitor the battery's voltage. Voltmeters draw voltage. Yes, they do. He removed it. Problem solved. How about that? That's hilarious. Scotty says, anybody know much about adding a tuner to your diesel truck? I installed the Edge CTS3 tuner on my Ram 3500 with the Cummins. And now I want to know, do I still use tow mode on the shifter at the same time? Well, yes, I would say so, because what tow mode does is that changes the shift pattern in your transmission, and it stops it from going into overdrive. And that reduces the wear and tear, the heat, all of that goes on with your transmission when you're towing. Is why you put it into tow mode on an automatic transmission, because that stops it from shifting into overdrive, and that's where you start to get into trouble when you're towing. So I'm going to say yes, Scotty, you should keep using tow mode when you are towing. Caveat that with towing in the mountains or towing anywhere where you hear the engine shifting a lot. The lower you can keep your RPMs, the better your gas mileage is going to be. Okay, fuel mileage, I should say, since you have a diesel. But yeah, the manufacturer's recommendation and best practice is to run with tow mode on, and also to shift out. Me personally, I've always towed the same way. Even when I was towing back coming from Arkansas with the tow vehicle I had and my pickup. When I was out in the flat going across Kansas and eastern Colorado, I didn't worry about turning the overdrive off. But once I finally got out of Fort Collins and started up the mountain in towards Laramie, I turned the tow mode back off, or turn tow mode on to keep it out of overdrive. Dave Cockrell's checking in. Hi, David. So nice to see you. Scotty says his Edge tuner is set in towing mode, and I don't know if I should keep the transmission in tow haul mode also. Yes. That would make sense, yes, to keep it into tow mode. It's 1:30. That's about the time I usually try to do the selfish plug. And ask you that if you like the video, be sure and give me that thumbs up. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Ring that notification bell. I've got a ton of great content still to come on the channel. A visit over to my website at trbullen.com is always greatly appreciated, as is your support of my Amazon store by visiting Amazon through the link in this video. Remember, as an Amazon affiliate, I get a small commission, but you'll pay the same price. And what will happen is you can visit to Amazon through the link in the description, and then go anywhere on Amazon, buy what you'd like. You can buy shoes or toothpaste, I don't care. And I don't know who buys it or anything. It's completely and totally anonymous. But I do get that small commission, and every little bit helps, trust me. It does cost quite a fair amount to run a YouTube channel. You would be surprised. I know that there are better and less expensive ways to do bandwidth, and the software I use is Adobe, but I get the whole Adobe suite because I use Lightroom and Photoshop and some of those tools pretty regularly. But even still, it does cost a fair amount of money to run a YouTube channel. So your support is greatly appreciated. David Cockrell says that he has a 2013 Cougar fifth wheel. Two things he needs help with: the little control panel that you turn on to check levels, turn lights on, and operate slide outs and awnings will quit working. But if I kill full power, shore, and battery, it'll start working again. Okay, it sounds to me like you maybe have one of two things. I would suspect a bad relay, something that's sticking or getting stuck, a relay in there that's stopping it from working, or check your grounds. The first thing to do whenever you're having electrical issues like that is to check your grounds. Okay? And because most often, you think about it, an RV rolling down the road is like a rolling earthquake, really. And despite the fact that, they do their best to keep all the electrical connections secure and those sorts of things, even in last week's chat when we were talking about shunts, it came up that a number of the viewers had issues with terminations, how the wires have been terminated and those sorts of things. And so it's inevitable that something might come loose, and so that would be my first thought, would be check grounds. But since it works and then doesn't, and when you cycle the power on and off, it works again, to me that sounds like a relay. Okay, it sounds like a relay that's sticking, and when you turn the power off to the coach, that relay releases for whatever reason. And so, but I would check the grounds to start with. Tim Meyer says, and Tim had suggested this in an email he sent me earlier. I think it might have been last week. I don't recall. Amazon's really kind of strange. In the Amazon operating agreement, it says that I can't send out a link like what Eric is suggesting, that you put a shortcut on your desktop. Now, you can do that on your own, but I can't send it out for you. Now, Eric can, okay? And I think he just did, and I appreciate that. Or excuse me, not Eric, Tim. But I can't do that as the affiliate, but you could do that if it's so convenient for you. So anyway, you can support me. It's greatly appreciated. Thanks. Let's see. Pat Running. Hi, Pat Running. There's a new name. Atwood Furnace in 8524-4. Turns on fires. Igniter continues to spark even after lit. Then it shuts down. Is it the flame sensor or the circuit board? Does it fire? Okay. Says it turns on, fires. The igniter continues to spark even after lit, then shuts down. So let me clarify this, Pat. It fires, the flame comes on, works fine, but the igniter continues to spark, and then eventually it shuts itself down. So it shuts the burner down, turns the igniter off. Is that right? Question mark? Tom Downey says every time he does a solder job, he seals it with paint, then heat shrink it. Okay, Pat Running says yes, correct. Okay, it very well could be the flame sensor. All right, because the flame sensor is looking for that flame. The sparker, the igniter, okay, is going to continue to click because the flame sensor has not sensed that there's a flame there, and it tells the computer on the furnace, okay, there's no flame here, quit trying to light the flame, turn the gas off, turn the sparker off. It's probably the flame sensor, all right? And so the way to test that is to trace the wire from the flame sensor to the board on the furnace, okay, the control board. And if you know how to do this, put an ohm meter, a volt ohm meter, in line with the line from the flame sensor side. Now you're probably going to have the igniter and the flame sensor should be two separate wires sticking into the firebox, okay? And so what we're looking for is the flame sensor, the way they work is when they get hot, they short or they go to ground, okay? So when there is no flame, the ohms, the amount of resistance on that flame sensor is going to be very, very high, a mega ohm or something like that. But when they heat up, and they heat up very fast, they go open and they go to short or ground, okay? That's the signal to the control board to quit sending spark to light the furnace. It tells it the furnace is lit. You can shut off all that and just let it run. So if you can measure that with an ohm meter, when the flame sensor is cold, the resistance should be very high. And when the flame sensor gets hot, it should go to zero ohms, no resistance. And so, yeah, if you could put a meter in that line, check it without the furnace trying to run at all. Turn the power off to the furnace, check it, okay? If that's reads correctly, then we need to revisit this. But it does sound like the flame sensor, Pat. I hope that helps. Feel free to ask any other question. Eric Myers had a really good suggestion, and I think that's a really good idea. And he says, whenever there's an electrical problem in a vehicle, no matter what vehicle, he always cleans the battery posts. Most times that will help. That's always a good suggestion. Unfortunately, there is really no security bot, Scotty. But Tim Myers was very kind to post the link to Amazon. And if you're so inclined, you could open that in your browser and type Control D, which will set it as a bookmark. Okay, David Cockrell says we're working on sounds like a sticky relay. So he says he shuts everything off in the RV, unhooked the battery, and hooked the tester, shows 14 volts charging, but at the lake with the heater running, it runs the batteries down to where I have to run a charger. Okay, no problem. How long can you run it before the batteries go flat? And how old are your batteries, David? 2 questions for you. Here's the thing with batteries. Even though they might read 14 volts or 13.6 or whatever, the older those batteries are, the less, especially lead acid, the less of a charge those batteries can hold. So the older the batteries get, so let's use this as an example. Brand new out of the box, that battery might last under a load, say for 2 days. Okay, I don't know what the load is, but we'll just say for 2 days. 2 years old, it may only provide that juice for that load for a day and a half or a day. At 3 or 4 years old, it might only be a half a day. Okay, David Cockrell says about 8 hours. They're brand new, just replace them. Okay. And you're sure those batteries are fully charged when you reach your destination. I'm assuming you're charging them uh, off your alternator or something like that. 8 hours. That's not a lot. And you're running your furnace. Okay, so what's your rig again? Let's see, David. A 2003 13 Cougar fifth wheel. All right. So the average RV furnace pulls about 5 amps. That's with the fan running. And, excuse me, back up. How many batteries do you have, Pat, and what chemistry are they? Excuse me. Okay, Pat was the furnace. David's the relay. Okay, sorry. We'll get it. I'll get it squared away here. David says, "How many batteries do you have, David?" Excuse me while I take a quick sip of coffee. Well, actually, tea. I don't drink coffee in the afternoon. David says generally at night the heater runs more, so in the morning I turn lights on, they flicker. Okay, 2 batteries. Okay, I'm going to assume. Okay, so you've got the furnace running. Okay, sorry, I'm trying to do this on the fly, but we'll get there. In addition to the furnace, what other loads do you have running off the 12 volt? Obviously, lighting. You probably have a furnace, or excuse me, you probably have your fridge. Anything else on 12 volt that you run? You're not running like a CPAP or any of those medical devices, are you? Anything else like TVs, any other electronic equipment that might be running? 8 hours is a little short, but with 2 batteries, you're probably going to have approximately 100 amp hours. I'm just guessing, I'm kind of swagging this here. The average furnace, and the furnace doesn't run full time. Okay, something else we got to keep in mind. I'm sorry. Got to keep in mind that in cold temperatures, your batteries are less efficient. Your batteries are less efficient in cold weather and in hot weather. So keep that in mind. Dave Cockrell says, fridge, furnace. He doesn't have a CPAP, but it's 110. And electric fireplace. Okay. Are you plugged in at the lake, or are you running only on batteries? Because if you're not plugged in at the lake, you're running on batteries, your CPAP, your 110 is using your house batteries, your 12 volt batteries, to provide power to your RV. Okay? So it's converting the 12 volts to 110. And that typically takes a lot of juice. CPAPs use a fair amount of juice because they're running all night. Oh yes, you are plugged in. And your batteries are running down. And with your furnace running. That's... Okay, so you've got some kind of a charger problem going on there, it sounds like. I'm just swagging here, okay? But David, it sounds like you've got some kind of a charge problem. Is your inverter an inverter charger? I would think it would be in that class of RV, in that age. So you're plugged in at the lake. When you run your furnace, it runs your batteries down. Let me make sure I've got this right. Yeah, totally, Tim. That's my question. Is the charger working? It sounds like the converter's working. Okay, 30, 20 to 50. All right. So that doesn't concern me a whole lot. But what does concern me is the charger on your inverter charger working properly? Now keep in mind, this is where the language becomes important. If it's a converter, the name that Tim used, that typically only converts DC to AC, and they don't have a charger associated with them. That would be really weird that your class of RV in that age and that manufacturer wouldn't have an inverter charger. Okay? So, with that said, let me just think this through logically for a minute. Let me just think about this for a second. Okay, so just off the top of my head, without actually digging into this a little bit deeper, my suspicion is that your inverter charger is not working properly. Okay? If it is truly an inverter charger, and it should be, given that, let's see, David, you had 2013 Cougar fifth wheel. Okay. So I would start by looking at the charger, since your batteries are new, that I would start looking at the charger, your inverter charger, and making sure that is working correctly. A lot of times an inverter charger may have a local breaker on the inverter itself. You may have a circuit breaker on somewhere in the system for the charger. Your charger might be separate. I doubt it. But it sounds to me like your battery charger, for whatever reason, isn't working properly. I think Tom was getting to something that does sort of make sense. But David, how much amperage do you have at the pedestal at the lake? Is it a 20 amp circuit, a 30 amp circuit, or a 50 amp circuit? In other words, if it's a 20 amp or smaller, we could be running into a problem where there's just not enough amperage to run the stuff that you're running inside and run the charger at a high enough rate to keep the batteries charged. So yeah, if you could let me know, David, on the pedestal that you're plugging into, is it 20 amp, 30 amp, or 50 amp? Tom Downey made a suggestion, bad connection on the negative side. Could very well be that. Again, what I think Eric suggested earlier was go through and check your battery cables, make sure everything's clean, make sure everything's tight. Make sure you don't have any loose connections. Make sure up on your inverter that everything is clean and tight. Make sure that you have the power completely turned off before you go messing around with any of this, because there are life-threatening voltages available at some of these locations. Good point, Tim. Tim says if the charger's working, a voltmeter should read about 13.6. It could read actually higher than that. When the RV is plugged in, if it's showing in the mid-12s, the charger is not working. Good point. Oh, okay. David says he has, at the lake, it has a 30 amp and a 20 amp, and that I run the splitter to use them both. Gotcha. So you're kind of making up to get 50 amps. So I wouldn't think... Yeah, I would check your charger on your inverter and make sure that is working properly. Check all your connections, make sure everything is tight, clean and tight. That's a good point too, Tom. If you have the opportunity, David, do a voltage drop test. In other words, unplug your RV. An easy way to do this is just to unplug your RV, turn on some stuff so that you're using your battery, and watch how fast the battery drops. Okay, the voltage on the battery. Now to go back to Tim. If the charger is working and your batteries are fully charged, you should be floating at around 13.6 volts. When the batteries are charging, you could see the voltage up as high as 14.5 or 15 volts. And if the battery charger is not working and the batteries are being depleted, then when you get down around the mid 12 volts, as Tim mentioned, then it either means that your charger isn't providing enough of a charge or it's not working properly. So everything kind of goes back to that charger. So I would check the charger on your inverter and make sure that it is working properly. Basically, Tim has a good question here, and he says this is something he's not aware of, using a splitter to combine 20 and 30. I don't know how that works. Basically, Tim, the splitters essentially will provide an unbalanced load. And this is why I don't really care for them. They work, but I don't personally care for them. So what it'll do is it'll put 20 amps on one leg and 30 amps on the other leg of the service. And then, so it splits the cable, because keep in mind that 240 will be 110 on a 3-wire setup, 110, 110, and ground neutral. Okay? Actually ground, no neutral. And so what they're doing is they're doing 110 20 amps, 110 30 amps, and so you're sort of getting 50 amps. It doesn't really work out to 50 amps, but you're sort of getting 50 amps. It's one of the reasons why I don't really care for those. But hey, you know, they work for people. David Cockrell says he thinks he's going to unhook the ground with the frame and clean it good. Yeah, that would be a good one to do. Check all your grounds, check everything. But yeah, if it's dragging the battery down overnight because you're running your furnace, and the batteries are brand new, as you mentioned, I suspect the charger. I suspect the charger that's a part of your inverter charger. Tom says if the 30 amp side is active, the 50 may not connect. It's a priority done in the charger. Yeah, actually it looks like basically, well, I don't know. I'll tell you what I will do is prepare we'll talk about those splitters next week. Dave says he actually uses the 30 amp and the adapter on the other 30 amp and hook the 20 lead to the 30 amp side, so it's getting 60 amps. Well, keep in mind you're not getting 60 amps because you have a 50 amp breaker inside your RV, and so the maximum you're ever going to pull is 50 amps before the breaker trips. Okay? So you're really not getting 50 amps. However, what you're talking about doing is okay. Yeah, we'll have a discussion about splitters and how they work and the theory behind that. Well, Tim, in a 220 single phase, you don't have a neutral. Everything goes back on the ground. However, it could be very hard on the neutral. And in fact, really the neutral gets all the work anyway, because in a 50 amp circuit it returns 50 amps and could return up to 100 amps. So yeah, okay, so we're gonna put that one on the list to research, and we will talk more about splitters next week and how they work, the pros and cons of them, and hopefully that will be helpful for folks. In the meantime, David, yeah, check that ground, check the charger on your inverter charger, make sure it's working properly. Tom has a good suggestion. Drop one of the 30 amp sides. So drop one of those 30s. See what happens. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we're coming up on pretty close to 8 o'clock. I usually try to keep these to an hour. However, if there are questions that come in, I'd be happy to answer them. And that is a good suggestion, Roundtown Scouter. Talk about the 30 amp, 50 amp plugs are wired. Okay, making myself some notes here so I don't forget that. Anything else that might be interesting about that? All right. Okay, last call for questions. All right, so next week we'll talk about splitters and how those plugs are wired and why in reality you're not getting 60 amps. You're really only getting 30, Dave. But we'll talk about that. Okay, so Dave says at his house he has 50 amps. It shows 14 at the battery disconnected without the batteries hooked up. That's odd. It's really strange. That's an interesting issue, interesting problem. David, could I get you to do me a favor and email me trbolin@gmail.com. trbolin@gmail.com. TRBOWLIN@gmail.com. I want to sort on this a bit more with you, David, because this is an interesting issue. If it shows 14 with the batteries disconnected, that indicates that maybe it's working. Yeah, this is interesting. This is an interesting one. So yeah, if you would, if you want to email me, Dave, we could take this up offline, and I'll have a bunch more questions for you, and we might be able to sort this out. Thanks, Tim, for posting that offline, and then we'll bring it up next week. So yeah, if you would like to do that, then I'd be happy to try to help sort this out, because I'm just as interested in it as sounds like a lot of other folks are. Yeah, Eric says clean all battery cables. All right. I got. Scotty says he had to put a coil on both sides of the power coming in, and that's because, although we say it's single phase, you've got 110 on each leg. We'll talk more about that. This is going to be an interesting discussion. Making myself some notes here so I don't forget. Okay. All right, that's close enough to 8 o'clock. Looking at switching over. Okay, the Shade Tree Intellectual. New name, new face. Hey, we're so happy to see you here. He's looking at switching over to lithium ion. Can they be hooked in parallel with lead acid? They can, but it's not recommended. And the reason is, Shade Tree Intellectual, is the way that you charge those batteries is different. Okay? A lead acid battery, when you charge it, the beginning of the charge cycle, it sends as much voltage as possible, actually as much current as possible, correct that, to the lead acid batteries until it reaches a certain point, usually measured in volts. Okay? That first phase is called bulk. Then once it reaches a certain voltage, then it switches over to absorption. And that's where it's continuing to add charge to the battery over time. And sometimes absorption can last as long as 3, maybe 4 hours. Once a lead acid battery has fully absorbed all of the electrons, all of the energy it can, it'll flip into float mode. And float will sit there and it runs at 13.6 volts and it'll float up and down and up and down and top off the batteries continuously. On a lithium battery, they're very similar. The bulk segment is the same, right? So it sends a lot of current to the battery up to a certain point. The absorption cycle on lithium batteries, it's much smaller, okay, much shorter. And then it'll go into a float stage as well. The issue you're going to run into is if you have lead acid and lithium combined on the same string, the lithiums are going to charge way before the lead acids. The battery charger is going to sense that things have charged. It's going to shut off. It's going to starve your lead acid batteries for voltage or charging. And keep in mind that if your lead acid batteries become weak, that those batteries are all going to fall down to the same voltage level. And so it's just highly inefficient, really not recommended. And so to answer your question, no, you should not combine or parallel lithiums and lead acid. It's going to cause a lot of trouble for you. You're welcome. All right, last call. Tom Downey says he has 53 phase at the house. After everything is fully charged, his draw is only 3 to 5. Yeah, that's what mine ran on my Class A too. Round town, take a no load. What is the voltage with batteries connected? Good point. All right. Okay, so it's a little after 8. Last call for questions. Any last minute questions, throw them over in the chat window. I'll hang here for a minute because I know there's some latency, as much as 2 to 3 minutes sometimes. So what Shade Tree Intellectual is seeing may be 2 minutes delayed versus what Scotty is seeing, depending upon when you entered the chat. So we'll hang here for a minute. Oh, well, thanks for that, Shade Tree Intellectual. He says he's been following me for a while. He appreciates my work. When we bought our RV, I binge watched your channel. Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate that a lot. And we're happy to have you here and joining us on the live stream. And as always, your questions are very welcome. You can ask them in the chat or you can email them to me, trbolin@gmail.com. I want to try a little experiment here. Good night, Tom. But I'm going to try a little experiment here. YouTube has enabled something that might come in handy in case I need to take a bio break, and that's the ability to run an ad during the live stream. And I don't know if that really runs right now. I just want to experiment with it. So I appreciate everybody coming. I'm going to run this real quick just to see what it looks like. Don't feel like you have to stay. But yeah, well, let's see what happens here. Not one thing. Interesting. Yeah, get rid of those lead acids, Shade Tree. That's really weird. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for coming tonight. Don't forget to give me that thumbs up if you like it. Oh, David Cockrell. Leads are small compared to, say, car battery leads. Normal. Yeah, it depends on how far the batteries are from the inverter charger. If they're within 6 feet, 2/0's probably normal. If it's more than 6 feet, it should be a more. Oh, it did work. Thanks, Tim. That's interesting. I'll have to watch the playback. But, okay. Yeah, so we're going to call this good. Yes, it works. Thanks, Wanda. It did, but I waited to respond. Okay, awesome. David, yes. If the batteries are close to the inverter, they can be fairly small, 2 aughts. And if with only 2 batteries, depending upon the size of your inverter, if we can chat about all this through email, that would be awesome. But yeah, but if you're running like 4 batteries, then you probably want to get up to around 4 aught. It really depends on how big your batteries are, how big your inverter is, and that sort of stuff. And we'll be able to um, sort a lot of that out in email if you're so inclined. Okay, thanks, folks. Have a good night. See you next week, and we're going to talk about the splitters, those dog bones, 30 amp, 50 amp, two-phase, single phase, all that stuff. I'll try to get some things graphed up real quick so that it sort of makes sense, because it is really confusing. But yeah, we'll talk about all that next week. So until then, good night. Peace. Goodbye. Thanks.